Sometimes I feel just a little tired inside. And I mean, I am not just talking about being tired in your physical body.
Right, like that physical exhaustion after a workout or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you spend a Saturday helping a friend move heavy furniture, or you push yourself through this long, grueling run, your muscles ache, right? Your joints feel heavy. But that kind of tired actually makes
It
sense.
feels earned in a way.
Totally earned. You
Huh.
finally sit down on the couch at the end of the day, and there is this distinct, almost pleasant satisfaction in that physical exhaustion. But the kind of tired I am talking about right now is, well, it's entirely different.
It's more of a mental weight.
Yes, exactly. It is this heavy, persistent, just foggy feeling deep in your mind. Do you ever wake up feeling exactly like that?
Oh, I think everyone knows that exact feeling.
Right, before your feet even hit the bedroom floor, before you have even had a chance to, stretch your arms or pull back the blinds to let the morning light in, you are just already exhausted.
The day hasn't even started yet.
Exactly. The day has not even officially begun, but the mental fatigue is already sitting heavy on your chest. You wake up, the room is still completely dark, and before you even sit up in bed, your hand reaches out into the darkness for your phone.
It's just muscle memory at this point.
Yeah,
It has genuinely become the defining physical movement of the modern human morning, honestly.
it really has.
The alarm goes off, and the arm immediately extends toward the nightstand. I mean, it bypasses conscious thought entirely at this point. We do not actually decide to reach for the device. Our nervous system simply executes the command before our prefrontal cortex has, fully booted up for the day.
Yeah, it feels entirely automatic, like a reflex, like breathing or blinking, and then, well, the avalanche begins.
Oh, the avalanche. That's a great way to put it.
You unlock that glowing screen, and suddenly, in the span of maybe 3 seconds, you are just hit with a barrage of input. Messages from colleagues, a dozen short-form videos of strangers performing their, highly optimized morning routines.
Right. The people who have already run 5 miles and made a green smoothie.
Exactly. And news alerts about global crises, promotional emails demanding immediate attention, everything just comes at you so incredibly fast.
It's a complete sensory and cognitive overload.
It really is. You are just lying there, still physically resting on your mattress, bathed in this harsh artificial blue light, and this insidious thought creeps in. You just think, why do I already feel so behind?
That is the core of it right there.
Right. The sun is not even fully up. The world outside your window is completely silent, and yet you feel profoundly, undeniably late.
Well, the feeling of being quote-unquote behind before the day has even commenced is just a staggering psychological phenomenon.
It's crazy.
It is, because when you open that device in the dark, you are instantly measuring your absolute zero, meaning your waking moment of raw, unprocessed existence, against the accumulated, hyper-curated output of the entire globe.
Wow, absolute zero. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, you are comparing your literal awakening to the polished finish lines of thousands of other people.
And if you are listening to this right now on your morning commute, or maybe you are, standing in your kitchen making your coffee, you are probably nodding along because we all know this feeling intimately.
We all do. We live it every single day.
You already know that screen time is a massive issue in our culture. You do not need us to give you some generic, surface-level lecture about how phones are distracting. We've all heard it a million times.
Right, the standard phones are bad speech.
Exactly. But the reason we are doing a deep dive into this exact morning phenomenon today isn't to repeat those tired talking points. The source material we are looking at today is, honestly, completely unexpected.
It really caught me off guard when I first looked at it.
Yeah. On the surface, it sounds incredibly unassuming. It is actually a short text designed specifically for English language learners, mapped to an A2 level.
Which is beginner level, right?
Right. In language learning, A2 means it is for beginners. It relies on really fundamental vocabulary and simple sentence structures. The text is simply titled, "My Day Without a Phone."
And I think the juxtaposition is what makes this so compelling. I mean, you would assume an A2 language practice text would be entirely devoid of nuance.
You'd think it would just be like, I have a phone, the phone is black.
Exactly. And yet, the sheer, unvarnished honesty of this text makes it one of the most universally relatable meditations on digital minimalism and mental fatigue I have literally ever encountered.
That's a huge claim, but I totally agree.
The constraint of using simple language actually forces absolute truth. There is no dense academic jargon to hide behind. It just strips the modern digital dilemma down to its absolute emotional core.
But, knowing it is a beginner text, you kind of have to wonder if it's just simplifying complex psychological concepts for the sake of an easy vocabulary lesson, rather than making a deliberate, profound statement.
Sure, yeah, that is a very fair initial skepticism. But, as we will see, the simplicity is actually the mechanism of its brilliance.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the text doesn't just describe the physical act of putting a phone in a drawer. It acutely dissects the emotional toll of our constant, unyielding digital connection. Our mission today is to follow the emotional arc laid out in this unassuming text.
I love that. So what exactly are we going to unpack?
We are going to explore the extreme, visceral discomfort of silence that we have all been conditioned to fear. And we are going to examine the physiological and psychological mechanisms behind the text's proposed solution.
Which is all about those micro actions, right?
Exactly. How microactions, these tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in our physical behavior, can help us regulate our nervous systems and finally reclaim our focus.
So, true to the source material's gentle, reassuring advice, where it literally pauses to tell the reader to just take a moment and relax, we are going to intentionally slow down the pace of our conversation today.
I think we all need that, honestly.
We really do. We are not going to rush from data point to data point. You do not need to stress or scramble to take notes as you listen to this. We are going to intentionally take a breath, lower the tempo, and just let the insights of this text wash over us.
Because we live in a society that demands constant, high-speed cognitive processing, this source text invites us to do the exact opposite.
Which feels like a luxury.
It does. It invites us to pause, to breathe, and to observe our own internal landscape.
So let's start right where the text starts, with that morning avalanche. The narrative begins with the exact moment we just described.
Right, waking up in the dark.
Yeah. The author wakes up, feels that deep internal tiredness, and their hand reaches out to grab the phone before they even sit up in bed. And immediately they are hit by this incredibly fast influx of digital information. The text specifically notes that everything comes, quote, so fast.
The speed is the critical factor here. I mean, the human brain did not evolve to process the simultaneous successes, crises, controversies, and opinions of thousands of people within the first 3 minutes of waking consciousness.
Yeah. It's just completely unnatural.
Totally unnatural. When the text points out that everything comes so fast, it is highlighting a fundamental mismatch between our evolutionary biology and our current environment.
And the emotional toll of that speed is just devastating.
It really is.
The internal monologue captured in this beginner English text asks that devastating question we mentioned earlier. Why do I already feel so behind?
That word behind carries so much weight.
Let's hold on that word for a second. Behind. It implies a race. It implies a track with a starting line and a finish line, and somehow, while you were unconscious and sleeping, everyone else fired the starting gun and started sprinting without you.
Right. It establishes an immediate, unearned deficit. You wake up, you consume this rapid, fragmented stream of data, and you immediately internalize the feeling that you are already not doing enough.
That your life is just inadequate.
Exactly. The text captures this brutal sequence perfectly. The notes that we scroll, and we scroll, and what is the actual result of that scrolling? We see everyone else looking happy, successful, and deeply confident.
And the contrast there is almost violently unfair to our own psyches. I mean, think about it. You are lying in bed, you probably have morning breath, your hair is tangled, you were wearing old pajamas, you haven't even had a glass of water yet to hydrate your body.
You're just a raw human being in that moment.
Yes. You are in your most vulnerable, unvarnished human state. And in that state, you are staring at people who are presenting their best, most optimized, heavily edited, and curated lives.
It's a rigged game.
Completely rigged. The text makes a profound observation about the result of this contrast. It says this leaves us feeling quiet and a little lost.
Notice the specific type of quiet being described here, though. It is not a peaceful, serene quiet.
No, not at all.
It is a diminished quiet. It is the feeling of shrinking. When faced with the overwhelming, loud, curated output of the entire globe, the individual ego just shrinks.
You feel physically smaller.
You do. You feel lost because your own internal compass is immediately overridden by the external validation metrics of the screen.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more. If the text says we reach for our phones before we even sit up, it's like we are plugging ourselves into a chaotic, high-stakes alternate reality before we even physically exist in our own bedrooms for the day.
That's a brilliant way to phrase it.
Is it any wonder we feel late when our actual physical day hasn't even started? We have already lived 1,000 other people's days in our heads before our feet have even touched the carpet.
And this brings us to a crucial piece of analysis from the source. It explicitly connects the sheer velocity of the information to this pervasive feeling of inadequacy.
What does it say exactly?
The text states, it's about how we live, how we think, how we feel during the day. The morning scroll is not just an isolated event. It sets the cognitive weather for the entire day.
Oh, the cognitive weather. I like that. It's the baseline.
Precise.
If you start your morning from a position of feeling behind and diminished, that underlying anxiety is going to color every single interaction you have until you go back to sleep.
It completely alters your mood.
Yeah, you are operating from a deficit in your meetings, in your conversations with your family, and your own internal thoughts. You are constantly trying to catch up to a ghost schedule that doesn't actually exist.
Exactly. But what makes this text so remarkable is its empathy. It doesn't scold the reader for this behavior.
Right, there's no judgment.
None. It acknowledges this shared condition really gently. It speaks directly to the reader, offering validation. It says, you're not alone in that feeling. Not at all.
Which is so nice to hear.
It is. It normalizes the fact that this overwhelming sense of being lost and slow in a blindingly fast world is simply the default state of the modern human right now.
But you know, acknowledging the problem is really only the first step. If this morning routine makes us feel so diminished, what actually happens when we attempt to break the cycle?
Well, that's where the experiment begins.
Right. The source text doesn't just describe the malaise. It walks the reader through the exact physical moment of attempting a day without the device. And it does not sugarcoat how jarring that transition is.
No, it forces a direct confrontation with what we might call the uncomfortable void of disconnection.
The uncomfortable void. Yeah, the text describes the author waking up on the day of the experiment. The physical habit is so deeply ingrained that their hand moves, like always, to pick up the phone.
It is pure, unadulterated muscle memory.
But then the conscious mind manages to intervene just in time and says, wait, today is different.
And the intervention of the conscious mind against an ingrained motor habit requires a significant amount of cognitive effort.
It takes real willpower to stop your hand midair.
It really does. And the immediate reward for that effort is not a wave of Zen-like peace, unfortunately. The source is brutally honest about this. It admits that the immediate sensation feels very uncomfortable. It explicitly uses the word empty.
Anyone listening right now who has ever accidentally left their phone at home while running an errand knows exactly what that emptiness feels like.
Oh, that immediate spike of panic.
Exactly. You reach for your pocket while standing in line at the coffee shop, your hand meets empty fabric, and your stomach just drops. There is a spike of genuine panic, but in the text scenario, the author is actually choosing this emptiness.
Which changes the dynamic completely.
Yeah. They note that usually in those in-between moments, they check messages or watch something. Without that external input, they literally did not know what to do with their own physical body or their mind.
They were just stranded in the present moment.
The text points out a harsh, undeniable reality. It says, when there is silence, we don't know how to stay in it.
This observation strikes at the very core of our modern behavioral conditioning. I mean, it raises a fundamental question about the true utility of our devices.
What do you mean?
Well, are we actually using our phones as tools for necessary communication, or have they morphed into sophisticated tools for noise generation?
Wow, noise generation. That is hard.
The text strongly implies that we have collectively lost the physiological ability to simply sit in a quiet room. We rely on the device to artificially fill the auditory and cognitive space because the silence has become absolutely intolerable to us.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The internal monologue the text captures during this phase is fascinating. It talks about that little voice in your head that starts begging for the device.
The craving phase.
Yeah. It says, at first I really wanted to check my phone. Like really, I kept thinking maybe just 1 minute.
It sounds exactly like addiction.
It sounds exactly like the bargaining phase of a sugar craving or someone trying to quit caffeine cold turkey. Our brains literally start negotiating with us, offering up completely logical sounding rationalizations just to get a hit of digital noise.
Just 1 minute.
Right. Just 1 minute to check the weather, or just 1 minute to make sure there's no urgent email from the boss, or just 1 minute to look at the news so I'm an informed citizen.
That bargaining phase is a very well-documented psychological response to the sudden withdrawal of a primary stimulus.
So it's a physiological reaction.
Exactly. The brain is seeking its accustomed equilibrium. When you deny it the rapid-fire novelty it expects, the brain perceives that absence as a problem to be solved. Just 1 minute is the negotiation tactic it uses to restore the familiar baseline of high-frequency input.
That makes total sense.
And what is truly insightful about this A2 text is that it does not attempt to bypass these negative, uncomfortable feelings with toxic positivity.
Yeah.
It openly, plainly acknowledges the boredom. The author asks themselves if they felt bored during this silence, and the honest answer is, yeah, a little.
But if they just felt bored and empty, what is the point? Why push through the discomfort at all?
Because the discomfort is temporary, and it is the gateway to a completely different state of being. Because the author did not give in to the just 1-minute bargain, a shift occurred.
A shift.
Yeah, the text notes that by sitting through that initial emptiness, by tolerating the mundane reality of boredom without reaching for a distraction, the feeling eventually gave way to something else entirely. It gave way to a distinct calm.
So the boredom transforms.
Exactly. The mind transitioned from feeling frantic and deprived to feeling slow, but also quiet.
And we have to differentiate that quiet from the quiet we discussed earlier, don't we?
Absolutely.
Because the morning scroll produced a diminished quiet, a feeling of shrinking and feeling lost. But this new quiet, the one found on the other side of the boredom, is completely different.
It's expansive.
It's an expansive quiet. It's a restorative quiet. The source frames the act of resisting that urge of sitting in the silence, feeling the itch to check the phone, and actively refusing to do it as a small win. The author states, "I didn't do it," and that felt kind of like a small win.
The phrasing small win is incredibly important in behavioral psychology. It is not about executing a flawless, monumental life overhaul in a single day.
Nobody can do that anyway.
It is about succeeding in a micro-negotiation with your own impulses. It is a restoration of agency.
Agency, that's the key word.
When you wake up and reflexively grab the phone, your actions are totally passive. You are acting as a receptacle for whatever the algorithm has decided to feed you that morning.
Just a passive consumer.
Exactly. But when you feel the urge, pause and say, no, I am going to intentionally sit in this discomfort, you become active. You are making a deliberate choice about where your attention goes.
It's deeply empowering. It is the sensation of taking back the steering wheel of your own consciousness, even if it's just for, 60 seconds.
And those 60 seconds matter.
They really do. But transitioning from that chaotic, empty craving state into this new restorative calm isn't super easy to conceptualize.
No, it's abstract.
To help us visualize exactly what is happening in our minds during this process, the source provides a metaphor.
Yeah.
And I just have to say, for a beginner language text, it is one of the most stunningly accurate and visually evocative metaphors for cognitive overload I've ever come across.
Yes, the river metaphor. It is the conceptual centerpiece of the entire text.
So the source compares our lives, and specifically the state of our minds, to a river. It says, when the river is very fast, the water is loud, messy, moving everywhere. And because of all that violent, fast movement, you can't see clearly.
It perfectly encapsulates the phenomenology of modern cognitive overload. Just visualize a rushing, turbulent river after a really heavy storm.
Like flash floodwater.
Yes, exactly. The sheer velocity of the water kicks up dirt, silt, mud, and debris from the riverbed. The water becomes completely opaque. It is loud, it is chaotic, and you have absolutely no idea what lies beneath the surface because the physical agitation of the water keeps everything suspended and murky.
And the text explicitly argues that our phones and the constant stream of digital input they provide are the exact mechanism making our mental river too fast, too noisy, too full.
The constant consumption of data, the endless scrolling, the rapid context switching between a funny video, a tragic news story, and a work email acts as a churning force.
It just stirs up the mud.
It is the storm that keeps the water agitated. But the text proposes a beautifully logical solution based on the physics of the metaphor. When you stop the input, even for one day, the river naturally begins to slow down.
Because the storm stops.
Right. And when the water becomes calm, it gradually becomes transparent, the silt settles, you can see through the water. As the text profoundly states, you can see what's inside.
Okay, wait, let me challenge this for a second.
Please do.
If my mind is the fast river, the phone isn't the water itself. The phone is just the storm agitating the water, like you said. But aren't we just substituting one form of noise for another if we put the device away?
How do you mean?
Well, couldn't someone argue that if I put my phone in a drawer and immediately pick up a gripping fiction novel or start doing a complex crossword puzzle, I'm just finding another way to keep the water moving so I don't have to look at the bottom? Are we really achieving clarity or just changing the weather?
Oh, that is an excellent pushback. Really good point. And the distinction there lies in the velocity and the fragmentation of the input.
velocity and fragmentation.
Right. Reading a novel or doing a crossword puzzle certainly engages the mind, but it is a singular, focused, slow-moving current. It requires sustained attention on one linear path.
It's predictable.
Exactly. A smartphone, by contrast, is a hurricane of highly fragmented, emotionally volatile data points hitting you multiple times a minute. It creates turbulence.
Ah, turbulence. That makes sense.
When the text talks about putting the phone away, it isn't advocating for an entirely blank, empty mind devoid of all thought. That's impossible. It is advocating for a reduction in turbulence.
So we're just trying to smooth things out.
By removing the chaotic storm of the phone, we aren't emptying the river of water. We're just allowing gravity to finally do its work on the suspended dirt. We are letting the cognitive silt settle to the bottom so the water becomes transparent.
So we are just clarifying the contents of our mind, not erasing them. But if we connect this metaphor back to the intense discomfort and the panic we discussed earlier, that desperate urge to check the phone for just 1 minute, it reframes that fear entirely. Our fear of silence might not actually be a fear of boredom at all. It might be a deep-seated fear of looking into the clear water.
Precisely. If the fast, muddy water obscures what is resting at the bottom of the river, then keeping the water fast and muddy becomes an incredibly effective psychological defense mechanism.
The noise is literally a shield.
Yes. The constant scrolling, the endless audio playing in the background while we cook, the social media feeds, we use them to intentionally keep the river noisy and opaque.
Wow.
Because if the water actually slows down and the dirt finally settles, you are suddenly faced with the stark reality of what is inside your own mind.
And people don't want to see that.
Often, no. You might have to actually look at your underlying anxieties. You might have to confront a lingering sadness about a relationship or acknowledge unmet desires and frustrations with your career. The muddy water protects you from having to process those difficult emotions.
We are actively using the digital avalanche to hide from ourselves. That is incredibly heavy. To just be, as the text suggests, means sitting with whatever is at the bottom of your river, without the distraction of the storm to look away. And that takes an immense amount of courage.
It really does. It requires a willingness to be completely vulnerable with your own consciousness.
Yeah.
We avoid the silence because the silence forces an unmediated introduction to our inner lives. And frankly, a lot of the time we just do not want to make that introduction.
The distraction is so much easier than the reflection.
Always.
Which perfectly explains why the initial transition from the fast river to the slow river feels so jarring and uncomfortable. You are dropping the shield.
You're left exposed.
Exactly.
Yes.
But the source makes a promise to the reader here. It promises that if you can endure that initial discomfort, and if you allow the water to slow down and clear up, you don't just see clearly, it says you can feel more, you can think more clearly.
The ultimate reward for facing the clear water is genuine, unclouded mental clarity and a deeper connection to your own true feelings.
The clarity is the payoff for the courage. I love that.
But as we transition to the practical application of this philosophy, the text makes a crucial pivot.
Right, getting into the how-to part.
Completely stopping the river, pulling the plug on the storm entirely and going completely off the grid sounds beautiful in a poetic sense. But as the text pragmatically acknowledges, attempting a full day without a phone can feel overwhelmingly difficult for most of us embedded in modern life.
It is a massive, often unrealistic leap.
It is. If you tell someone who checks their phone 150 times a day to just put it in a safe for 24 hours, they're going to fail. And they're going to feel terrible about failing.
So if going cold turkey triggers that intense panic response and the defense mechanisms we just talked about, what does the text actually propose we do? How do we achieve this clarity without completely short-circuiting our nervous systems?
This brings us to what I consider the most psychologically sophisticated aspect of this A2 English text. Its architecture of safe change.
Save change.
Yes. The text explicitly and wisely advises against grand, sweeping, punishing gestures of self-discipline. It tells the reader directly, don't try one full day. That can feel too hard.
It is actively giving us permission to lower the bar. It says, maybe start with 1 hour. Just 1 hour without your phone.
And it doesn't just leave you hanging for that hour either. The instructions for what to do during those 60 minutes are remarkably specific, incredibly simple, and entirely grounded in physical reality.
What does this suggest?
Well, it does not instruct the reader to sit in a lotus position and meditate on the nature of suffering for an hour. It does not tell you to use that hour to be hyperproductive and write a business plan. It says, do something simple. Drink tea, sit quietly, look outside, or even talk to yourself in English.
Okay, if you are listening to this right now, especially if you are someone who likes complex life hacks and optimized routines, you might be rolling your eyes a little bit.
Sounds a bit silly at first.
It does. You might be wondering, is staring out a living room window and saying out loud, I am making tea, this is my cup, really going to fix my chronic digital burnout and existential dread?
It sounds like an activity designed for a toddler.
On the surface, it does sound almost comically basic. But the neurological and psychological mechanics behind these instructions are rock solid.
Explain that for us.
The text is advocating for classic grounding exercises. Think about where your consciousness resides when you are caught in a scrolling loop. You are entirely in your head, your attention floating in a disembodied, infinite cyberspace.
You completely forget your body exists.
Exactly. You are completely disconnected from your physical environment. By focusing your attention on a tangible, physical object, like the process of brewing tea, feeling the warmth of the ceramic cup in your hands, watching the steam rise, you physically pull your consciousness out of the overwhelming digital void and anchor it squarely in the present moment of physical reality.
So it's a mechanism for physical anchoring.
Precisely. Saying the words, I am making tea, forces your brain to acknowledge the undeniable reality of the physical room you are standing in, rather than the curated, high-stress realities of 1,000 strangers on a screen. You are reminding your nervous system of where you actually are.
Exactly. But the most profound argument the text makes in this section is about the fundamental psychology of behavioral change. The source says, small steps feel safe, and when something feels safe, we do it again and again. And that's how change happens. Not fast, but slowly.
It is entirely counterintuitive to how we usually approach self-improvement.
We always want the quick fix.
We do. We usually associate getting better with massive, painful discipline. We think, I'm going to throw my phone in the ocean, delete all my accounts, and wake up at 4 a.m. every single day. We equate change with suffering.
But the text is arguing that comfort and safety are actually the necessary catalysts for sustainable change.
Is that true neurologically?
It is absolutely correct. This raises a vital point about why so many of our ambitious New Year's resolutions and radical life overhauls fail so quickly. They fail because they lack safety.
They trigger panic instead.
Right. If you try to go from 10 hours of screen time a day to 0 overnight, your nervous system's threat detection center, the amygdala, will panic. It reads that sudden, massive deprivation as a literal threat to your survival because it is losing its primary source of dopamine and stimulation.
So your body actually thinks it's dying.
In a way, yes. You will experience massive spikes in anxiety, you will feel awful, and you will inevitably relapse into the old habit just to soothe the panic.
The brain goes into full survival mode. It's screaming at you, this is dangerous. Give me the familiar noise back.
Precisely. The brilliance of this source text is its intuitive recognition that if you want to create sustainable change, you must bypass the brain's threat detection system.
You have to sneak past it.
Yes. An hour of drinking tea feels safe. Sitting quietly and looking at a tree feels safe. By stringing together these tiny, safe, manageable moments, you slowly rewire your baseline tolerance for silence and lack of stimulation without ever triggering the amygdala's panic alarm. You are essentially sneaking the behavioral change past your own psychological defenses.
It is a stealth operation for peace of mind. I love that. By keeping the stakes incredibly low, you basically guarantee success.
You set yourself up to win.
And to fully embrace this process of safe, slow change, the source suggests one final, fascinating step. We actually need to re-examine the words we use.
The vocabulary reframing.
Yeah, we need to actively redefine the vocabulary we use to describe our own internal feelings during this process of disconnection.
Because it is, at its core, an English learning text, it explicitly takes the reader on a tour of the vocabulary of this experience.
Yeah.
It literally defines the words for the student.
But it's doing so much more than just a dictionary definition.
Oh, absolutely. In doing so, it provides a profound masterclass in cognitive reframing. The way we label an emotion directly dictates how our body physically responds to it.
Let's walk through the specific words they highlight, because the way they define them is so incredibly gentle and insightful. The first word they tackle is bored.
A word we all hate.
We do. The text defines it simply as, you have nothing to do and you don't feel interested. But then it immediately adds this crucial addendum, and that's okay. It's a normal feeling.
That normalization is incredibly powerful and desperately needed in our current culture.
We have culturally demonized boredom, haven't we?
Completely.
We treat the word bored like a highly contagious disease that we have to cure immediately with a glowing screen. At the absolute slightest hint of boredom, waiting for an elevator, sitting at a red light for 30 seconds, waiting for a friend to return from the restroom at a restaurant, we whip out the phone like we were applying a tourniquet to a bleeding wound.
It's a reflex to avoid even a second of understimulation.
We cannot tolerate even a micro moment of non-stimulation. But the text just deflates all that panic. It literally just says it's a normal feeling. It grants us explicit permission to just exist within the boredom without having to fix it.
And by removing the panic and the urgency associated with boredom, we completely defang it. We stop treating it as a crisis.
Exactly. What's the next word?
The next word they explore is strange. The definition the text provides is something feels new or different. And again, the text steps in to clarify the emotional weight of the word, saying strange is not bad, just new.
We confuse unfamiliarity with danger all the time, don't we? A quiet mind, a slow river feels strange because we aren't used to it, so our immediate assumption is that something is terribly wrong. We think strange means bad, but it's just new.
What is fascinating here is how redefining the word physically alters the physiological experience.
Really? Like in the brain.
Yes. When you label the uncomfortable feeling of not having your phone as bad or scary, your body produces stress hormones like cortisol. You are signaling to your brain that you are in danger.
Just by the word you use.
Right. But when you cognitively relabel that exact same physical sensation as just new or strange, you shift the processing from the fear centers of the brain to the prefrontal cortex. You engage your curiosity instead of your fear response. You strip away the chemical anxiety just by changing the label.
That is incredible. The vocabulary actually changes the chemistry. Then the text moves to the word calm. It defines it as quiet, peaceful, not stressed. It presents calm not as some magical state of enlightenment, but simply as the destination, the slow river we reach when we sit through the boredom.
And it intricately connects this destination of calm to the concept of habit. It defines a habit as something you do again and again.
But with a message of hope attached.
Exactly. The text makes sure to emphasize habits can change, slowly. It is a vital reminder that your current digital reliance, that muscle memory of reaching for the phone in the dark, is not a deep-seated character flaw or a moral failure.
It's not who you are.
No, it is simply a repeated behavior. And a repeated behavior, no matter how ingrained, can be overwritten with a new repeated behavior.
Which leads us perfectly to the final and perhaps most important phrase in their vocabulary tour, small win.
The crucial piece of the puzzle.
The text defines it simply as a small success, but it adds that these small wins are very important because they build confidence.
Let's connect this back to the very beginning of our deep dive, that morning avalanche. Think back to how the text described us feeling in those first few moments of waking up.
The feeling of being behind.
Right. We reached for the phone, scrolled through the curated lives of others, and immediately felt behind, lost, and not good enough. Our fundamental sense of self-confidence was dismantled before we even got out of bed.
We shattered our own confidence by comparing our unvarnished reality to the highlight reel of the entire internet.
Exactly. So the critical question becomes, how do you rebuild that shattered confidence? You cannot do it by suddenly deciding to become the most productive, perfectly optimized person in the world today.
That's just setting yourself up for more failure.
It is an impossible standard. You rebuild it through small wins. By explicitly labeling the choice to sit quietly and drink tea for 1 hour as a small win, you actively rebuild the self-efficacy that the morning scroll destroyed.
You're proving something to yourself.
You prove to yourself in a very small, incredibly safe, undeniable way that you still possess agency. You prove that you have control over your own attention.
It is the ultimate antidote to feeling behind. You aren't behind anyone. You are simply securing a small win right where you are in your own living room with your own cup of tea.
It's a beautiful reframing.
Let's take a step back and look at the incredible arc this deep dive has taken us on today. It is really astounding to me that all of this rich psychological insight was sourced from a few hundred words designed for beginner English practice.
It has been a genuinely remarkable journey. I mean, we began with the frantic, exhausting reality of the modern morning scroll, analyzing how the sheer, unnatural speed of digital information creates a temporal distortion, leaving us feeling inadequate and perpetually behind before our physical day has even commenced.
And from that chaotic starting point, we waded into the uncomfortable void of disconnection. We looked at the friction of muscle memory, the brain's desperate bargaining for just 1 minute of noise to avoid the withdrawal of stimulation, and the harsh realization that we have slowly forgotten how to exhale comfortably in silence.
which naturally led us to the profound visualization of the river metaphor.
The muddy water.
Yes, the understanding that our constant digital consumption acts as a violent storm, intentionally keeping the river of our minds fast, noisy, and opaque. We realize that our deep-seated fear of silence is often, in reality, a fear of letting the cognitive dirt settle and being forced to see what actually lies at the bottom of our own minds.
The noise is a shield against our own vulnerability. That was a huge takeaway for me.
And finally, we dismantled the myth of massive, painful resolutions by looking at the architecture of safe change, the profound wisdom of not trying to fix everything at once, starting with just one single hour.
Grounding ourselves in the tangible physical world by making tea, acknowledging the reality of our immediate surroundings, and actively reframing our internal vocabulary. Learning to accept that feeling bored is completely normal, realizing that feeling strange is just feeling new, and understanding that accumulating small wins is the only sustainable way to slowly build back the confidence we lose to the screen.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to lean into the soft, deeply reassuring conclusion of the source text. It leaves the reader with a message that I think every single person navigating the modern world needs to hear right now.
What does it say?
It says, very simply, you don't need to change everything today. Just one small thing, maybe one quiet moment, maybe 1 hour without your phone.
It just takes all the pressure off. It removes the heavy burden of having to be perfect.
It absolutely does.
Yeah?
And it makes a beautiful, empowering promise to the reader. It says, you are not behind. You are learning, slowly, step by step.
You are not behind.
So to you, listening to this right now, whether you're driving or working or just sitting at home, take a deep breath. Relax your mind. Be kind to yourself. You are navigating an incredibly noisy, unprecedentedly fast world. And the mere fact that you are actively seeking out a moment of quiet, the fact that you listen to this conversation, is in itself a profound, small win.
That sentence, you are not behind, is worth writing on a sticky note and putting on your bathroom mirror, honestly.
I might just do that.
As we close out our time together today, I want to leave you with one last thing to ponder. It builds on the core imagery we've explored today. The source text makes it clear that our phones are the storms that keep the river of our minds loud, messy, and constantly churning up the silt.
The constant turbulence.
Right. So if you were to take the text's advice, if you were to put down your phone for just one single hour today, allow the storm to pass, let the water finally slow down, and let the silt settle to the bottom, what exactly do you think you would see waiting for you at the bottom of your own river?